I always like to remind people that it does not matter where you look. You are constantly being reminded of the incredible glory of our Creator. Every time that I use a telescope, every time that I look at a galaxy or try to take a picture of a nebula or a star cluster, a globular cluster, these types of things, I'm astounded at the beauty and the design of it. When I look around here on Earth and I see all of these animals that we've been looking at, and the trees and the plants and all of that, it's like these are all a testament to a grand designer. And then we go into the microscopic world. We take the telescope, turn it in on itself, and turn it into a microscope, and we look at these tiny little particles that many times mimics the same patterns that we see out in the cosmos. And then we stick a spade under the ground and we start digging up history, and then we realize that that history is backing up what the Bible said all along. And then we take our patishas and our shovels and our picks and our brushes, and we start digging and using in paleontology, and we dig up the bones of all of these fossils that again are testaments of the biblical accuracy of the flood. So you can't miss all of these signs unless you're blind or have been blinded. And so many people have been blinded, they've turned away, and they really don't want to see what is clearly in front of them. And yet, it is all around. We need the Lord to touch those people, and we need His wisdom to be able to know how to witness to those around us. But it's obvious. All you have to do is look around. I told you just as I walked in 2 days ago, I suppose, that a delivery had just been made to our new center. That delivery is a Deinosuchus. And the Deinosuchus, or Sarasuchus, was a massive crocodile-like creature that looked a whole lot like a modern-day crocodile, except they grew so much larger. So this was what was just delivered. It's a 5-foot-long Deinosuchus head, and soon that will be on display in the new center. So I want to tell you a little bit about the new center, the Wonder Center and Science Museum, because I'm just going to tell you a quick story, because this really is amazing how it all came to be. About 6 months ago, let's just say 6 months ago, I had no idea that this place existed, all right? And then, let's see if I can get a picture up here. And then my brother and I were talking probably for the past several years about how we would expand once we needed to expand. What would we do to expand? We were in a facility in, let's see if I can get this. We were in a facility in Lewisburg, Tennessee. It was a beautiful place, and it did exactly what we needed to do for many years, for about 6 or 7 years. But we had grown to the point where we needed a larger space. So we were in about a 12,000 square foot center. We had our TV studio, we had our offices, we had everything we really needed. We had a small event center and all of that. But nothing like this. Over the past couple of years, we've been running out of space as we grow. We just recently had to purchase 2 40-foot-long high-cube shipping containers and start to store things. And we're like, well, what are we going to do about this? And the thing that crossed my mind was, well, I guess we could build a warehouse on the back. We have a few extra acres, or we could build another facility and all of that. But that would take maybe 2, 3, 4 years. All of a sudden, it would take away all of our time when we should be focusing on important things. And we would be just focusing on building a building, right? So we don't really need to do that. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, 6 months ago, 5 or 6 months ago. I'm walking through the office, and our communications manager said, hey, David, did you know that the Renaissance Center just went up for sale about an hour up the road? And I was like, the Renaissance, what is that? I don't know what that is. She said, I used to go there as a child. I used to go to the Planetarium shows and the science things and all of that. And she said, it's just a really, really nice place up there near Nashville. And I said, well, it sounds great. I don't know what it is. She pulls up a picture. She said, it's going up for auction. Look at this thing. And she pulls up a picture. And, you know, I'm staring at this. Normally, I would just laugh. Normally, because you look at this, and it is like a science museum sitting there, this massive structure. But instead, I felt in my spirit that maybe there was something to this. And I said, well, let's call them up. So I called up the auction house, and they said, how did you figure out that? Where did you hear about this? This is not supposed to be public yet. Nobody's supposed to know about this. And I was like, well, somehow, obviously it made its way onto social media somehow that this was happening. And they were like, well, yeah, it's going up for auction here in a few months. And they were like, well, I guess we can share details. What do you want to know? I said, I'd like to see it. Well, we aren't really scheduled to do showings for another month or two, but yeah, I mean, you know, when would you like to see it? I said, I'd like to see it tomorrow. And they were like, no, well, we can't do, well, I don't know about this. We'll check on it for you. So they called me up. They called me back, and they said, okay, the vice president of the auction house is going to meet you on site tomorrow. We've made it work out. So the very next day, I arrive on site. I pull up at this beautiful structure, and the vice president of the auction house is there. Now, he is taking notes as he leads me through this walkthrough, because he hasn't actually had a chance to look at the site or even figure out what he's going to say about it. So he's like trying to figure out where everything is as he takes me on this walkthrough. Hours later, this is over 100,000 square feet. It takes a long time to get through this, multiple levels, all of these different sites. So hours later, we're nearing the end of the tour, and I was like, okay, now just be honest with me. What is this going to take? What are they expecting? And he said, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, I have no idea. We have nothing to base this on. Museums don't go up for sale very often. Big structures like this really just don't go up for sale very often. It's not really a university. It's not really structured like a school. It's not really great for just offices. It looks more like a museum than anything. But who wants to buy a museum, you know? So he said, I'm just going to be honest with you. This is, in a couple of months, it's going up for a no-reserve auction. How many of us know what a no-reserve auction is? Yeah, that's like on eBay. When it says no reserve, that means that you can bid $2, and if nobody bids $3, you get it for $2. He said, and by the way, I just want you to know that also, if you were to throw out a pre-auction offer, I think the university would take it. So there was a university that had this place. 20 years ago, it was developed as a community arts and science center. Basically, it is a beautiful thing, but they really underutilized it. They ended up turning it over to a university that only used a few rooms in the basement and a couple of other scattered rooms across the property. So I had to go home and pray about this. So I prayed about it, talked to different people, thought about all of these different options, and then called them up and said, you know what, I'd like to make a pre-auction offer. This is a couple of months before all of this is supposed to happen, right? And I threw out a number. I was waiting for the laugh on the other end of the line, and instead they said, David, we would be honored. Boom. So 5 or 6 months ago, I had no idea this spot existed. The next day, I went out and viewed the property, and 3 months and 3 days ago, something like that, we got the keys to the property. We now have this center in Nashville. So it is quite an amazing center. I want to tell you a story about what happened about, I guess it was 8 months ago. 8 months ago, there was a tornado that came through Kentucky. You may have heard about it. Devastated parts of Kentucky, killed a lot of people. Okay, this tornado had kind of started down near Nashville, and it came across this area somewhat. It wasn't very bad around this area, but it was still, the winds were strong enough to pull some of the pieces of metal off of the sphere. Do you see the sphere over there? That's a planetarium. All right, so this planetarium has metal pieces, 18-gauge aluminum, about 4 feet high, about 6 feet wide, all over it. It tore some of those pieces off, and those pieces actually went flying across the rest of the roof of the entire building, just slicing the roof all up on the building, causing leaks and damage and all sorts of things. A few pieces came and busted 2 of the pieces of glass on the front. That entire curtain wall of the front of the building, it damaged 2 of the pieces of glass. A few pieces came off and created a few tiny dents along the front of the building where those panels are. So a few weeks, which actually continued into the last few weeks before they were complete, but a few weeks before we purchased the property, their insurance paid to completely redo the roof of the entire building, with a 20-year warranty transferable to the new owner. All right, then they were like, well, I guess we've got to repair this glass on the front, this broken piece of glass, but we can't find the exact right tint. So I guess we'll just have to rip out every piece of glass in the entire front of the building and just completely replace it with new, high temperature, highly efficient glass. Well, a couple of the panels on the front that were dented, they couldn't find the exact same color of panels. So I guess we just have to completely reface the whole front of the building. Then they were like, well, we got to touch up these areas where there have been some leaks inside, right? So they do new ceiling tile, and they're painting an area where there was a leak, and the painters busted one of the sprinklers with the sprinkler system. So now everything is flooding. They're looking for the sprinkler turnoff valves, and they can't find them. So now everything is getting soaked. This was about a month, I suppose, before we actually got the property. So they're looking for the turnoff valve. They can't find it. Everything's getting soaking wet in one whole wing of the building and all of that. And they finally find it and get it turned off. Well, they're like, well, now what are we going to do? I guess we have to re-drywall, re-carpet, repaint, recondition, re-ceiling tile, do all of it. It's basically like a brand new building. Now, in 1999, my family had just moved from Charlotte, North Carolina to Middle Tennessee, to the Nashville area. And I remember, I was, probably 8 years old at the time. And I remember, 8, 9 years old, I'm in my family's backyard, and I'm looking, and I started to find a crinoid. How many of us know what a crinoid is? A crinoid is a sea animal. It looks like it was on a stalk, and it had like a sea lily looking thing at the top of it, and it would float around. It had this big weight at the bottom where it could kind of move along the seafloor, but it wouldn't get pushed too far. I started to find sections of those crinoids in my backyard at 8 and 9 years old. And then I found some coral. And then I found some bivalves, some seashell imprints. And I would pick those things up, and I would be like, well, you know what? I'm nowhere near any water. There must have been a lot of water here. You know what? This is proof that the flood really happened, right? This is from Noah's flood right here. So I got a fishing tackle box, and I started to put those fossils in the fishing tackle box. Well, pretty soon, I had collected too many fossils for the fishing tackle box. So I got this big tough box, like goes in the back of a pickup truck. It's about like this right here. And I started to put in all of these fossils, and I printed out a little sign, and that little sign said, Rives Fossil Museum. And I taped anybody that would come to our family's house, I would drag them over to the box, and I would open up the box, and I would say, you got to see this. And I would pull out these rocks and these fossils, and I'm like, what you're seeing here is proof of the flood. Look, this is a sea fossil here in Tennessee, and we're nowhere near the oceans, and all of this is proof that the Bible is true. Look at this. And I'm showing them and all of that. That was in 1999. That was the same year that this site was being built, an hour up the road. And the Lord was saying, yeah, David, one day you're going to need a bigger box. So here we are today. I mean, I couldn't make this narrative up if I tried. There are so many things that had to fall into place for this to happen that it is just, there's nothing to do where you can say, yeah, I made a wise choice here when I did this, or, oh yeah, I really planned this out. No, you have to give all glory to God on something like that. And that's the way He wants it. He wants you to know that you could have never done any of it, that it is all Him. So, this site is going to be the largest science museum in the world from a Christian perspective. It is well over 100,000 square feet. It has a giant rotunda where we will have big long-necked dinosaur models and other special exhibits. It has a 430-seat auditorium and theater with a freight elevator going backstage that goes down to a loading dock. It has a 140-seat full dome tilted planetarium in the big sphere off to the side. It's one of the few spherical planetariums in the world. There's one in Berlin, one in Tokyo, I think, maybe a few of them, but it's actually spherical on the outside, and when you walk into this thing, of course you see the dome on the inside as well. So it's a very unusual spot. In addition to that, it does have classrooms. It's got 70-seat university-style tiered classrooms. It has 30-seat university-style tiered classrooms, has other auditoriums. It has so many different exhibit spaces, museum exhibit spaces. And then in addition to all of that, down in the basement, because the university was using it as a nursing lab, it actually has a fully functional biology laboratory with all of the students' desks already set up, ready to go. It already has a chemistry laboratory with sinks at every workstation for every student, with Bunsen burners all over the place, with chemical storage and this and that and the other already in place. Then down in the basement, it has a full commercial kitchen. And you're like, well, what does this thing need with a full commercial kitchen? Well, that's because right next to the full commercial kitchen is a dinner theater. And the dinner theater is this big round dinner theater where you can sit around, where we intend to have children's puppet shows and creation conferences and Christian comedians and Christian songwriters in the round, kind of like Bluebird Cafe style. All of these things, and this whole facility is set up, ready to go. It was just sitting there, waiting to be utilized, waiting, I believe, for this moment. So, all I can say is it has been a tremendous blessing. It has also taken a lot of time. Haven't gotten a lot of sleep in the last 3 months, but at the same time, it is well worth it to see what the Lord is doing. We've got friends here who actually live in the area who have been volunteering their time to work with us on the gift shop and on some of the cleanup and construction and all of that. It really is an amazing place. It still needs some help. It is 100%, this is perhaps the most important thing about the entire place. At this point, the facility is 100% paid for. No debt. Now, we still have some challenges there. We still do have to repair portions of the planetarium. We still have to do some cleanup and install exhibits. All of that will take several $1 million, but we're pretty confident based on what we've seen happen in the last few months that the Lord's got a plan. But y'all be in prayer with us on that, because we do need to raise some money. This is an important project because I've been to museums all around the world. I just got back from leading a paleontological dig in Kansas. You were with me on the dig. You've been with me on the dig before. We had an extremely hot day, so we went to the Sternberg Museum in Hays, Kansas. Was that good? It was pretty good, right? Except if you do not have a guide as you go through that museum, you're going to see a sign over here. You're going to see live tortoises walking around with tortoise shells fossilized tortoise shells on a stand, and this big sign that says stasis right next to it. All right? They are teaching you these evolutionary atheistic doctrines as you walk through the center. Everywhere you go, you get this little bit more of this whole religion of evolution. And so we walked through it, and I was able to actually stand at each portion of the museum and kind of talk through some of the facts that were being stated as opposed to the speculation that was being stated as fact. And yet most people don't have that opportunity. So if you go to a science museum, for the most part, you are going to come away with learning facts that you don't know whether they're facts or fiction, but they're stated as facts. All around the world, that is the problem with science museums. This is going to be a science museum from a different perspective. We will take you through the same exact things, the fossils, all the geology, the astronomy, the paleontology, the genetics, all of that, but we will consistently be pointing back to God's design. And yet, we call it the Wonder Center and Science Museum. The first time Tennessee figured out that we had actually purchased this about 3 months ago, the local media went crazy. But it was predominantly positive, y'all. Because it's like, well, they don't know what to think about it. It's a science museum. It's the Wonder Center and Science Museum, but it's owned by Christians, and you're going to be talking about God, and we can't figure this out. So nobody knew what to say about it. The media was overwhelmingly positive, and I think it's going to be a good witnessing tool because people will, I think even secular audiences are going to be coming to this science museum, and as a result, they get to learn about our biblical and Christian perspectives. It's a very unique site. So with this, we are working and interfacing with some of the top minds in science, and we are developing exhibits based on every area of scientific study. And one of those scientific minds is Sal Cordova. Sal, would you come up here for just a moment?
That I work for one of the top geneticists on the planet. He was an atheist, became a Christian and a creationist. And so quietly, God has been bringing the top scientists on the planet to tell of God's creation. And 18 years I took care of my mother, my widowed mother. I thought I lost my career. I wanted to be an astronaut and a hedge fund manager, but it says in 1 Timothy to take care of your widowed mother. And for 18 years, that's what I did. I said, how am I going to get a job? Cornell geneticist John Sanford gave me a job to work in this. I can tell you a little bit about the work I do. Would you like me to do that?
Yeah.
All right. So if you take a pen or a pencil, you put it in water, it looks bent. And it says in 2 Thessalonians 2:11 through 12, God gave them a strong delusion so that they'll be condemned who love pleasure in it, righteousness. Yeah. You look at the biological world, it will look evolved if you're willing to look at it that way. Just like if I dip this pen into this bottle of water, it'll look that way. You can persuade yourself it's bent, and it's not. Creationism is trying to explain why it looks a certain way. We have evidence. John Sanford has shown that our genomes are decaying. As Jesus said, this world is passing away. His words abide forever. We also know the geomagnetic field is decaying. This world is passing away. It also means the earth is young. The genealogy of Jesus Christ, as told in Luke, can be read as literal. Therefore, that's the inspired word of God. So then we had the problem of why we look similar to chimpanzees and all. We had just gotten I've been saying, God, why would you do that? Because it's kind of like that bent pencil. It's like, are you trying to deceive us? Because, you look at the patterns out there, and the number one reason Christian kids leave the faith, at least they did a poll on this, it's the problem of human-chimp ancestry, the appearance of it. We look a lot like monkeys. And I'm like, God, why'd you do that? Are you trying to deceive us? And God turned it around, because when I was at the NIH, I saw how we did research. One of the things that broke my heart is we do embryonic stem cell research. I found out it's from aborted fetuses. And I said, we don't have to do that. You look at the book of Leviticus, the picture of Christ where we're always doing these sacrifices on innocent animals. By his stripes we were healed. The way we do some of our best medical research is on mice, chimpanzees, even plants and bacteria. The reason we have this similarity is the pattern that God established there. It's just like by his stripes we were healed. By these innocent creatures dying for us, we're able to advance medical knowledge. And that's what I wanted. That was the piece of the puzzle. I said, God, why would you let us be deceived like that? And it's like, no. Just like Snell's law, it's not really a bent pencil if you look at it the right way. And we just got published in, I've had 2 secular publications. We snuck it through the gatekeepers. Creationists now, teams of them are in secular literature. We're kind of keeping it quiet because we don't want the editors to force retractions. But we have, I'll try to finish up because you gave me 3 minutes. The way proteins work, just like parts of the car, it has to be shaped just the right way to connect. The way we're able to figure out how to affect medical cures is to know how things are shaped, but we don't have microscopes powerful enough to figure out how they're shaped. And this is a really tough problem. And we kind of do it with things like X-ray crystallography, etc. But there's a pattern that God has laid out. It says in Proverbs 25:2, it's the glory of God to conceal a matter. It is the glory of kings to search it out. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. And God says, surely you're a God who hides himself. God is put in store for us today, here toward the end of time and the end of the age, evidence for us to know that he's the creator. And the pattern we found, we just got published in Oxford University Press. We didn't find it, we're joining the fray, is little pieces of every creature. If you take them, you put it through these supercomputers, it'll tell you the shape of the proteins.
Wow.
We are now going to be able to advance medical science because God put the patterns out there, pieces of the puzzle spread out through all creation. And so I'm privileged to have a chance to report. I'm hoping I'll do some good exhibits for you.
Absolutely.
And the secular scientists will come to this museum. We will teach them. We will teach the next generation.
Amen.
God
Amen.
bless you.
Amen. Hey, Sal, stick here for just a second. Amen to that. We really do appreciate your research. Now, you have a couple of things, a couple of sayings. One is geometry is priority.
I like geometry's destiny. We're trying to come up with some memes for the exhibit so the kids can remember. Mm-hmm. And I was like, how do we teach kids protein biology? And I mean, just like, this is so complicated. I studied the homohexameric helicase, the topoisomerase, and just like, how do we do this? And I found this little kids puzzle. It's like, that's how it works. Yeah. Because for years we were saying, how can we show that the kids that we're fearfully and wonderfully made? And I realized it's just a little kid's toy. Because when you look at the proteins and you put colors, it looks like these little 3-dimensional puzzles that the kids put together. Mm-hmm. And so we were always wondering, why is it if it, like if you, expose people to radiation, their body starts to blow apart? It's because when you change the spelling of the proteins, the DNA, it changes the shape.
Yes.
And that's why...
it changes the God design shape.
That's why we can't evolve for the better. I mean, if I just took a hammer and just started hammering on things, you're just not going to improve it. That's why, I mean, they used to, 50 years ago, they used to take radiation. They said, oh, we figured out how to change the DNA. We just expose things to radiation and all these toxic chemicals. We'll make all these new wondrous creatures, and that didn't happen. That idea didn't last very long. Yeah. And it's because of the change in geometry. Because the hardest thing I had was arguing with university professors. But then when I showed them the geometry, where you have charge distributions and you have to have the right shape, if you just change even one little letter out of 1,500 sometimes, the protein's dead, you're dead. Yeah. And geometry, we'll have to come up with a saying. So that's why I need a marketing guy like David here to help me.
Thank you, Sal. Thank you. You know, so that's a great example, and we're going to put this into several visual displays in the museum that anyone can get, whether you're 5 years old, whether you're 100 years, no matter what you are or where you're at, you'll be able to go through and be able to hands-on try different shapes of proteins and see why if you change it, the whole thing breaks. Sal brought up just like something not being able to fit if you go and hammer on it, right? So if I were to take the capsule off of this microphone right here, and I was just to ding it on the floor for a few times, right? So now I've changed the shape. There's everything here for a working microphone. And yet, at that point, the capsule would not screw back onto the body of the microphone, would it? So would it be a working microphone? No, at this point, everything is there for a working microphone, and yet it would fail to function in its capacity. So you basically have a paperweight at that point. The same thing happens throughout our bodies, throughout all of cell biology, through all of these different fields where mutations cause a ding on the microphone, and therefore it doesn't work like it should. We see the exact same thing going on all throughout the biological world. So this is an important thing to get across. We're gonna talk a little bit about genetic entropy. We'll talk a little bit about that geometric design and the folding of the proteins in a very, very easy to grasp way through about 3 different exhibits. And we're also going to work with another mutual colleague and friend, Dr. Joe DeWeese. We're working on an exhibit as well where we talk about deoxyribonucleic acid topoisomerase enzyme number 2. Topoisomerase enzyme number 2 basically is a God-given ability to fix DNA that has wound in and around itself, all right? So basically, what we find is that DNA is like a double helix. You've all seen the models, right? Well, here we have 2 strands right here, and those 2 strands I can turn around. And there are ladder steps within those 2 strands that have base pairs. They have information written in them, okay? Well, what happens if I were to keep twisting? If I keep twisting enough, what happens is, all of a sudden, we're getting kinks. You see that? Just like an old telephone cord, right? The other thing that sometimes happens is that elegant DNA structure gets in a knot. It gets catenated, is how we call that. Well, this is really bad because then these little molecular machines that come through, they read it and then they replicate it for the next cell. Well, that actually can't happen if there's a knot. They can't get through the knot. So that means that we would die if it stayed that way for too long. Well, here's what happened. God created a little thing called topoisomerase enzyme number 2, and topoisomerase enzyme number 2 actually comes in. It's going along here. It finds the knot. I'm being very simplistic, obviously. But it goes through. It finds the catenated portion, the knot. It's like, okay, this is bad. This is really bad. I've got to fix this. So the enzyme will basically snip. It'll loosen the knot and snip the cord right here. Well, at that point, then you've got a ladder broken in half. Everything's just going to fall apart and unravel, right? No, because it pinches both sides of the DNA strand, pulls it apart, then it takes the other strand, the knotted strand, and unknots it, and then it sews it back together again. Now, this is an amazing process that is going on in a lot of life. It's going on inside of you as we speak. If we did not have that ability, we would not be having this conversation right now. But it gets even more complex, and it gets even more mysterious for those who try to explain things through naturalism, because let me ask you a question. Where does topoisomerase enzyme number 2, where is it developed? How does it know how to create itself? The DNA. But if the DNA gets knotted without the ability to unknot itself, what's going to happen? We die. So, if you do not have the DNA and the topoisomerase enzyme simultaneously designed to work together at the exact same moment, then life becomes impossible. What I'm telling you is that it is a chicken and an egg problem where both things have to have been created, engineered, designed from the first moment by an all-knowing creator who knew exactly what we would need. And even in this sin-cursed world where we deal with cancers and where we deal with other things, our bodies would actually be able to repair themselves in certain ways. The other amazing implications of this research, this is amazing. If you can catenate and unknot things, what if we could knot things? Maybe what if we could purposely mess up cancer cells? So the implications in scientific research and medical research are strong for this topoisomerase that is really cutting-edge science. Everything we're finding within the scientific communities, especially in genetics and biology, are consistently pointing back to the design of the God of the Bible and ultimately back to Jesus, our Creator. So those are some of the things that we hope to be able to break down in experiments and exhibits and in different ways that everybody can enjoy and admire at the Wonder Center. And we really do hope to be open, the first exhibits, by the end of the year.